Coming from exponential potential to not being able to pay for the rental or even a bill from the dental.
I didn't like showing up late to find Sig. Sig never mentioned blow, never bought it, never asked for it, was always gleaming on a crest of it, would do any amount you'd put in front of her for any amount of time. I was her boyfriend, so it was my job to keep those copper eyes flashing with the right fuel mix. The deal was, I kept her high so I could show her off. I kept me high so I wouldn't think too much about the deal. That was from my most recent session of Dwelling, a solo journaling RPG for ghosts where the main character looks back on his life and begins to suspect that he may not have been having as much fun as he thought he was. Also in this episode, we'll show you the sunny countryside of medieval Japan via the Ryuutama RPG and the inside of a derelict vessel full of Blood Angel Terminators trying to hold their own in cramped quarters versus agile swarms of hungry aliens. There's a lot going on right now.
The rapper only record I got is the one that's wrecking your block. So get off my jock, cause you know, and I know that my flow's terrific. So when they say it's hip hop, I'm what they meant, bitch. I kicked it, yup, I kicked it, come on.
Welcome to Starkville, Colorado, where sits the microphone of me, your host, the Lord Chief Rocka, number one. This is episode 107 of Breakup Gaming Society. Thanks for being here. I badly overloaded the holiday plate, so let's dig in before it spoils. Games of the week are going to take us far and wide. First up, Ryuutama, excerpts from the latest installment of my TTRPG interview series with Walt, who lightens the typical mood with a twee in the best way storytelling game about bards who get into charming entanglements while roaming the medieval Japanese countryside. Then, a selection from my latest work with Dwelling, a solo RPG for ghosts. We're at the halfway point of the book, where the narrator descends to the basement of a haunted house for a full-on cocaine flashback. The recall is not euphoric. We finish up Games of the Week with Space Hulk, Death Angel, a gripping and cinematic cooperative tactical game that kicked off a multi-year Fantasy Flight Games buying spree that, in retrospect, set the rhythm of our household Saturday nights for the next 6 years. Track of the Week, Can I Get Open by Original Flavor. Follow along as I chase a sample back from this 93 track and end up finding a well of solstice magic inside the many saxophones of jazz giant Rahsaan Roland Kirk. But first, quick announcement for my pals out there who design indie games, or people who love meeting indie designers and trying out their labors of love in fun settings. I just learned that Quirk Events Indie Board Game Showcase is accepting applications until January 6 for a series of demo events designed to introduce indie games to new fans. It started in Boston in 2017, but this year the itinerary includes Beantown, Chicago, D.C., New York, Denver, and Philly. Again, you've got until January 6th if you want to apply for a table to show off your stuff. Learn more about it at quirkevents.com/game-registration. Best wishes for success to all. Next, talks about a charming TTRPG, a less than charming memory in the Dwelling RPG, and the indestructible Blood Angels who still fight gene stealers on my table more than 15 years after I bought Space Hulk, Death Angel. Here comes all the games of the week.
Bitch, I kicked it, yup, I kicked it, come on, you couldn't bang with this if your name was Genghis Khan.
If you've been following my interview series with Walt about indie tabletop role-playing games, you know the subject matter of these games can get pretty bleak. With early November evenings slamming shut like an icy prison door, I spotted the merry scent of something different on Walt's list, Ryuutama, an any award-winning game where you and your friends take on the roles of young bards. I decided that was the broth I wanted in my bowl. Following is an excerpt from my 19-minute chat with Walt about this pastel breath of fresh air, complete with slow-turning windmills, dragons, and a bit of riffing because we just can't help ourselves. Here we have what looks like a pastoral Japanese step into a Studio Ghibli scene and have a nifty adventure.
Yeah, that's pretty much the long and short of it. I think, especially after something like Homa, this is a nice change of pace, a little ray of sunshine, a breath of fresh air if you want to open up the window. So no collapsing economies, no moral doom and gloom, just some good vibes today.
We could all use some. One of the things I'm dealing with is somebody who's, kind of saw what direction I was heading. They were nice. They never asked anything direct, but at the end they handed me this really interesting pamphlet on depression. Problem is, I can't remember which of the 7 deadfall traps on my property I left it in. I was making new traps, and I think it might be trap 6, but I'm not going in there to look because I might have set that son of a bitch.
Well, if someone falls into that one, they've at least got a little literature. Might help them out.
Yeah, I love, having something uplifting to read while a sharpened piece of rebar is in my abdomen. It didn't take us long to ruin that wholesome vibe. So, but I was reading a character sheet yesterday. So it looks like you're a wandering bard of some kind in the Japanese countryside, and it looks like the scenarios, or the at least best off the shelf arc, is the character needs to get on the road with their lute, or whatever the medieval Japanese equivalent of a lute is, and have a journey, and that journey sort of gives you the vessel for your story.
I think it's a shamisen.
Ooh, good pull.
It's a very interesting blend of traditional, like, Western RPG, specifically D&D, with sort of the medieval European fantasy window dressing, but it has a very Japanese agrarian vibe kind of overlaying and underneath it.
I was looking at one of the sample character sheets to try to get a sense of what's being asked of me and what I can do. And I'm looking right now at, again, pronunciation here, a sample character sheet from the resource page of this game for a character named Haruka Ryuutama. She's 16 years old. Her class is a farmer. She's got magic, and her class skills are robust. I mean, she can carry a lot of stuff. Animal owner, she can have up to 3 critters, and she has a side job, which uses her dexterity. SPI.
I think spirit
seems intuitive and play inspiring music, and so if I didn't know anything I'd know about the setting, I'd assume that this stuff is almost as detailed as D&D. For strength, dexterity, intelligence, spirit, there's hit points, and also this is and I think this is all anybody needs to bring to a beach. She has a short sword and a cute sun hat.
What else do you need?
If you have only those 2 things, you're absolutely equipped for a fatal standoff with any metropolitan police force in the country. But there we are, polluting the intent of the drink. So I'm looking at this, and it looks like there's actually quite a bit of stuff to do. I get that there is spell casting in this game. There is combat. There are situations you're going to get yourself into that are dangerous or troublesome.
It's relatively crunchy. It's not as crunchy as, say, D&D 3.5. For people that like a little more depth in the mechanics and some more mechanical strategy, this would probably be a good choice if you like the kind of overall concept.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like the mechanics of a journey are very well envisioned, because terrain and weather are in effect. So if you're up to your ankles in mud, that's going to have a bearing on your day. And there's a bonus or penalties for the rain, strong wind, fog, hot, cold, hard rain, and etc. And also grassland, wasteland, woods, highlands, rocky terrain. So you have detailed terrain stuff here, and status effects that shows you can have anything from shock to just catching the flu to being tired or having a sprained ankle.
Yeah, and it's lean in that sense, is like that it's pared down compared to what you would find in probably even D&D 5e, but definitely in 3rd edition. But it's not so complex that it doesn't fit in this little A5 book. You don't need an encyclopedia of books like you do for Dungeons and Dragons.
That's probably good. I like some of the character background where you talk about they talk about Haruka's hometown and reason for travel, and I think that can of course inform a lot of how you play this in terms of one of these long walks. Now, is this just sort of like a really cute cartoon version of just being a bard class from D&D? Because I don't play D&D. I haven't touched it since 1982.
It's kind of by default, to a certain extent, much more idyllic. Especially at that time, D&D was meant to be. Just the scope of what people are doing with Dungeons and Dragons now has expanded so much that you could very easily, I suspect, find a game that's doing something very similar to this. It's not super niche, but it's niche enough that you have to have the right kind of people who are going to buy into the premise of, let's go on a wholesome, sweet adventure through the countryside rather than let's go slay the fucking demon lord Ragnarok and steal his soul gem and sacrifice it to resurrect a dark god or something like that. I don't know what D&D players do.
This is the kind of neat stuff that thinking about is very nice to do in this time of year and this stage of my life and at this level in the precipitous drop of the country. And that's there's a sample quest I'm looking at called the Grineal Road. The outline is the group is headed to a town that is about to celebrate a festival dedicated to travelers. The trip through the fields should have been simple, but they end up somewhere mysterious because of the Greenland's dragon they meet along the way. They even become targets of thieves and may lose something important. Will the PCs be able to retrieve their items and make it to their destination? And then there are 3 acts in which certain things happening with a climax and an ending. And the activities here include anything from picking raspberries, for which you have to do a skill check. I guess if you can't pick raspberries, you're in big trouble. But there are also incursions from bandits. And they find a dragon while looking for the raspberries. You know what it reminds me of is the kind of danger you'd feel like reading Wind in the Willows. The danger had a kind of coziness to it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it wouldn't be interesting if there were not challenges, but it's not like in some games where, like, after one roll, your character's dead. It's not supposed to be heavy like that.
That, again, was from my ongoing series of talks with Walt. Over on the blog at breakupgamingsociety.com, you'll find every game we've talked about so far and links to the complete interviews. That post is called Wild and Plucky TTRPGs You Could Be Playing Instead of Dungeons and Dragons, or something similar with also too many words in it. But that's enough sunshine. Parallel to this talk, I continued to grind through scenes in the Pages of Dwelling, a solo RPG for ghosts from my friends at Good Luck Press. The game places your narrator in a home once owned by a relative, guiding you room to room as you face various phantasms and vivid memories. I've drifted into 2 main storylines. A character in his 30s who is tormented by memories of a high school love, lost income, lost years pursuing the wrong kinds of pleasure in large servings. Party's over, and it's time to pay the bill. I'm at the dead middle of the book, and the prompts have guided us to the basement. Where better to bottom out? This location has 2 major prompts. The first one is a conjuration that I'm still working on. The other is a remember prompt that sees our hero bouncing party to party with his enabler and wingman, trying to juggle bags of coke, his current girlfriend, and the appearance of his high school flame. The story of that sad affair starts out like this. I chanced across her one last time in the waning days of the crew. Rick and I had started off at the Divine Antler, hitting it pretty hard. Some little hustler from Nebraska had gone to the bathroom with most of a gram and handed Rick back a baggie with almost nothing in it, then just walked off like she was dropping the car keys with the valet. You're welcome. Help your fucking self, Rick shouted after her. That's the second time she's done that shit. We only had a couple key bumps left by the time we got to Rhino and went down the steps to the party at the garden level condo. I guess you can't sell it at markup if you call it a basement. I didn't like showing up light to find Sig. Sig never mentioned blow, never bought it. Never asked for it, was always gleaming on a crest of it, would do any amount you'd put in front of her for any amount of time. I was her boyfriend, so it was my job to keep those copper eyes flashing with the right fuel mix. The deal was I kept her high so I could show her off. I kept me high so I wouldn't think too much about the deal. But I felt wrong-footed. Rick was unflappable. I don't know how he managed to go even harder than I did and never act like a shorted-out wire. One of the reasons I liked abusing drugs with Rick was because I felt like he fit with me in that overlap between the hardcores who had nothing going on except those parties and the people, us, who could get torn up and still keep our white-collar jobs even if it meant washing our faces at 7 a.m. on no sleep, going right under the fluorescents for 9 hours with our skin peeled off. We spotted Sig and threaded through to her. I clasped her around the waist and passed off the ravaged little baggie. She had the pro-party reflex, scooped it without moving her eyes off me or looking down. I kissed her neck and she purred, and I lingered there so everybody could see me do it. Even some of my friends, too loose, too late at night, would look at her and say some extremely out-of-pocket shit like I wasn't standing there. Letting all that slide was part of yet another tacit contract that required everybody to be off their faces about half the week. I was just trying to tell them about what you said on the phone the other night. I swear that at some point she'd trained her blink reflex to go at 1/3 normal human speed. Them, in this case, was a group of 3 dudes, 6 of whom I think were DJs. You know about when you were in that meeting? Oh, like farting in an empty coliseum. They loved the quote. She had ways of showing me off, some kind of glamour for vocab trade, I guess. I told the story of that meeting, then started telling it again. The party sphinx was in the circle too, just listening and looking amused in a lazy, intelligent kind of way. He always looked innocuous and wholesome in his blazer and jeans, thin hair swept back. Rick told me once about what went on at his house, and it was almost enough to make me rethink my whole shit at the time. Okay, I just hit up my guy, except we gotta get to Lakewood, Rick leaned in to tell me. Lakewood? Fuck. My whole chest crashed. Corey's here. We talked to him? Let's be real, Jace, he said, squeezing my shoulder in a brotherly way. You gotta catch him before he goes on tilt. Look at him. I couldn't argue. He was over against a wall, mouth moving to start one word that never came out, just pawing at his girl. Dude, I'm too fucked up. You're too fucked up. This was a bit of theater we'd do. Rick was never too fucked up to get his tan SUV to the Connect. Supernal powers parted the seas for that craft. The complete story, if you can stomach it, is recorded for you on the Breakup Gaming Society blog, along with links if you want to check out previous sessions. The title of the latest entry is Dwelling Solo RPG Session 6, the Triple Dungeon Feature. Working with Dwelling has been a tough experience, man. I agonize over the chapters because I'm guilty about being a lazy ass on the written page my whole life. I also didn't realize how sick I'd get of writing about this part of my life, even with some fictionalized distance. A couple sessions back, I decided that I was just going to destroy this guy. Maybe that could be a constructive kind of thing, because maybe this offers some chance at exorcism of the past, and, now that we're at the book's midpoint, a chance to fashion something else after this crescendo of excess. Stay tuned. I vowed I'd take on every scenario in this book, and I'm going to stick with it. So now let's finish up with some better memories. The comforting sound of an autocannon turning aliens into wet confetti. This segment kicks off a series looking back at some of the titles from Fantasy Flight Games' golden age in the earlier 2000s, way before the Asmodee buyout turned their catalog into a dead mall by comparison. Playing these games was a golden age for our house, too, in terms of both learning what designer games could do and having a lot of people to play them with us. Space Hulk, Death Angel, Citadels, Chaos in the Old World, Arkham Horror, Tannhauser, Fury of Dracula, Wiz War, Cosmic Encounter, Game of Thrones, Netrunner, and possibly the deepest I've ever fallen in love with anything, Warhammer 40,000 Conquest, the card game. In hindsight, Conquest was a personal capstone for both Fantasy Flight and me. Their partnership with Games Workshop, the people who own the Warhammer 40K IP, folded just 2 years after the game's release. I'd never played anything so intensely. Like Space Hulk Death Angel, it solved the problem I had of wanting to fight and play inside the hysterical sprawl of non-stop massacres that is the W40K universe, but without having to paint minis or wonder how bad my faction was going to get hosed when the next codex came out. But for now, let's rewind to the little box that started it all, Space Hulk Death Angel, which I bought as a joke at the Barnes & Noble on Academy Boulevard for $20. It was about the size of a big paperback. How much risk could that be? In Space Hulk Death Angel, you're pitted in either solo mode or with up to 5 pals against a forlorn and dangerous derelict vessel called the Sin of Damnation. You're playing as Terminators from the Blood Angel Space Marines chapter. Now, Blood Angels are 8 feet tall, even before putting on the Terminator plate, all but invulnerable to the average threat. Except the Sin of Damnation isn't an ideal arena for them. Lurking around the craft are swarms of Tyranid gene stealers who are faster, more numerous, and highly cunning. On an open field, there wouldn't be a story. The ridiculous Blood Angel firepower would turn them all to paste in seconds. But this abandoned craft's many shadowed nooks even the odds as the bulky and slow Terminator suits clomp their way to the objective, getting flanked and ambushed at every turn. Designer Corey Koneska's job was to translate the successful larger format Space Hulk board game into a card-driven battle that delivered the same tension and strategy. Your Marines are represented by a column of cards down the middle of the table. Room features and alien enemy cards appear to your left and right, shifting as you change locations or your foe comes up with a new angle. You've got to maneuver and blast your way through a number of ship locations and survive long enough to get to the last card, which drops a final challenge in your lap. Beat that, and you survived, usually with about a quarter of your guys. Gene Stealers spawn on both sides of your column and attack constantly. Bad rolls or bad positioning can get you gobbled up in a hurry. About a third of the time, you're screwed by the second or third room because you've already lost too many of your battle brothers. About another third of the time, you can fight your way through to the ultimate or penultimate room before being engulfed. No win on the table, but you can at least approach the Emperor on the Golden Throne knowing you did your imperial best. And then you get the cinematic payoff in another 30% of the games or so, hitting that last objective with just enough strength and time to fulfill the last room's condition. It's always a thrill. The squad mate who survived 3 blindside attacks, and in so doing, kept the whole column from collapsing. Activating a room feature, such as the dramatic option to intentionally detonate a large tank of fuel that blunts the mass of Gene Stealers just enough to buy you time for an extra maneuver. The furious string of offense rolls that clears out every alien on a whole side of the column, getting you up out of your chair and flexing like a tight end that just caught the game winner in the end zone. These thrills get richer and more accessible the more you get inside the nuanced decision space of the game's action scarcity, which abstracts the chaos of close-in fighting in a cramped, dangerous place. Each of your squads can only play one action per turn: maneuver, attack, or play a support action that shores up your fellow's ability to survive attacks. And you can't play the same action for a squad on successive turns, which is a long way of saying that the juice of this game is realizing that you can't blast your way out of problems, and you've got to figure out how to make these humorless, clunky, genetically designed fanatics of yours pirouette like ballerinas through a mix of calculated risks, finessed positioning, and some good rolling. Each squad's 3 sets of commands also come with sub-abilities unique to that team. I still take this game out and run it solo several times a year, and I think I'm still seeing new ways to be better at using the unique squad abilities at the right time. If there's one thing that's changed since 2010, when I played this game to excess with my stepson, it was seeing the powerful gestalt of all the actions rather than banking on good rolls and withering attacks, which you'll still need to win, but that footwork adds a dimension and rolls it all up into a boffo combination of theme, setting, cinematic evocation, and tense problem solving. Some copies of this game are still floating around on the secondary markets. Searched a minute ago and saw a few going for north of $200. So I'll be holding on to mine, this well-matched sparring partner and its worn cards, which I finally had to sleeve because they were about 1 molecule thick. In the next week, I'm hoping to get on the line with board game writer Matt Thrower to get his notes about the high points of those early 2000s Fantasy Flight releases. He's a brilliant, well-traveled guy, so keep an eye out for that talk should I be able to line it up. My personal retrospective will run parallel to that effort. Next time, I'm going to talk about another Fantasy Flight monster that landed on our table circa 2011, Arkham Horror, 2nd edition. Next up, Track of the Week.
Bitch, I kicked it, yup, I kicked it, come on, you couldn't bang with this if your name was Genghis Khan.
I first heard the instrumental for Original Flavors, Can I Get Open, on the Future Primitive live track that featured Cut Chemist and Shortcut from the Invisible Scratch Pickles, absolutely destroying it on 4 turntables at a live show in the Bay back in the 90s. It's one of the snappier pieces of sampling and a great representative of the fun that was the late Golden Age. I let the whole instrumental play more than I do the vocal version because it just makes me feel so damn good.
Right.
One of my favorite features of the New York stuff from 91 to about 94 was the hyperactive style of crew rhyming that's typified by the famous Scenario track with A Tribe Called Quest and Leaders of the New School. The inventiveness, punch, playfulness, and variety of multi-mic counterpunches to the end of a line, all the oohs, ahs, woofs, and whats. These verses were also a kind of sampling too. You never knew when somebody was going to jam a piece of a 70s cartoon theme show or a commercial in the middle of a verse. In Can I Get Open, you get references to Jaws and The Wizard of Oz.
Donna, get out the water. Nah, not yet. Ready, set, go. When I grab the mic, they get petrified. Why? Hey, I'm just so fly. Lions, tigers, bears, oh my God. Goodness gracious, witness, style, drive the child, wow. I'm ripping this microphone. Ain't no place like home, ain't no place like home.
I had to look it up on whosampled.com to spot it, but this track actually has a piece of mega composer John Williams' Jaws theme providing some of the bottom end. It also has a plucked instrument melody. Is it an upright bass or something else? I had to know where this one came from. It turned out to be the prelude to Roland Kirk's 1969 album, Left and Right. And this was how the broader magic of the solstice found me through the side door. Christmas commercials and nativity mangers, always trying to tell you what you should feel this time of year, but somewhere in the course of listening to this album, non-denominational holiday joy found me and knocked me over. Earlier in the evening, I'd broken up my 3 days of isolation to tip one down at the Trinidad Lounge. I had my first ever taste of Malort. Pro tip? Try a nip of this Chicago staple back-to-back with a sip of forgiving bourbon like I had Tin Cup. It works. Donovan came back to the shack for a bit. I coached him through his first game of Resist, or tried to. I forgot how quickly he gets a game when you set it in front of him. He charged his way to a win, and down the dirt road he went in a Subaru, leaving me with a slight buzz and an overwhelming desire to chill out with one of my favorite instrumentals, which led me, content and alone in the darkened living room, listening to the entirety of the LP that birthed the sample. All of it. Kirk seemed to have an instrument for every facet of his kaleidoscopic soul. The second track, Expansions, clocked in at over 19 minutes, and I held on for the whole ride, wondering if God took this man's vision away at age 2 so he could show you what sunlight on the trees looks like in a valley where clamorous parades of the dispossessed honk and wail all their suffering and joy like the culminating scene in some magical realist epic. I'd never heard anything quite so alive. Listened to every track on the album and woke up in the morning wondering if the divine keeper of the playlist hadn't sent me my own saxophone Jesus. Go look at what I'm talking about and tell me you don't feel something. His ability to do circular breathing and play multiple horns at once is sort of the hook that gets you to watch, but underneath is a really inventive composer's mind that seems to take in every sense, every style of American music, every emotion, and push it back out in something that sounds both acutely envisioned and totally serendipitous. Extra credit, you go on YouTube and watch some of the set he did with his quintet in Bologna, Germany in 1973. If you're not astounded, well, I'm astounded. So that's the end of episode 107. Next time, I swear I'm going to have those first play notes from SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, if only to prove that I'm not constantly mired in and bedazzled by the past. If you think I did a good job on this one, hit the donate page and drop a 10 spot. I'll send you some stuff in the mail, including the Breakup Gaming Society cocktail book, which you can view either as a dangerous drink challenge or an ill-advised biography from the earlier days of the show. In either case, it's fucking art and you should own one, if I do say so myself. And that's it for 2025, too. See you in 2 weeks for fresh outrages, new crises, and, in defiance of it all, more play. Lord Chief Rocka #1, signing off for the year. May you fight long and well.